Now, besides creating purchase orders, you can also create purchase invoices. And this is generally done in two different situations. The first one, if you want to post expenses, for example, and at the end of this lesson, there is a practice in which you can post an expense by creating a purchase invoice. But the second scenario, one that I will show you right now, is when, for example, the vendor sends a purchase invoice including the receipts of different purchase orders. So you will receive one invoice with multiple receipts. So this means that by default, you cannot post the invoice from the purchase order, because there we are limited to a one-on-one. So let's have a look at what I mean and how we can process such a purchase invoice. So I've done some preparations. So let me go to purchase orders. So I will use the search function to go to the existing purchase orders. And I've created two purchase orders for vendor 10,000. So let me scroll down. So here you can see the first one. So order 106.26. So let me show you. So in this purchase order, I've entered some chairs. So item 1900S, 20 pieces. And as you will see, I already received these pieces. So they have been shipped by the vendor. We have received them in our warehouse, which means I was able to post the receipt, but we didn't receive the invoice yet. So nothing has been invoiced so far. And the same goes for the second order. So if I click on 106.027, you can see the same, but in this case, we have ordered 1 day later, and we have included two different items, so guest chairs, blue ones and red ones. And also here you will see that everything has been received, but nothing has been invoiced yet. That's what you can see here. Now suppose that this is based on an agreement that we have with this vendor, and this means that, for example, we can purchase throughout the whole month, and at the end of the month we will receive one general invoice in which everything that we have received that month is included. You see, so that's the scenario, that's the situation that we have here. So this means that at the end of January, we will receive an invoice with these two items together with the item of the other purchase order. And this means that we only have one invoice to invoice two different purchase orders. And this also means that I cannot post the invoice from the order, because then I will have to post two purchase invoices, and we only have one. Well, there's now a specific function that we can use to post such an invoice. So let me show you. So in this case, we will create a new purchase invoice. So if I go to the role center and if I click here on purchase invoice, I can create a new purchase invoice, and I will start in the same way as the purchase order. So I will enter, for example, the vendor number. There we go. In this case, I also have to enter the vendor invoice number. And by the way, let me invoice on the last day of January. And then the vendor invoice number. And now we will have to enter the lines. And on the purchase invoice that we physically received from the vendor, we see the three different items being invoiced. But we don't enter the lines manually here, because otherwise, if I would do that and post the invoice, the system will again post a receipt of the items. So that's something that I cannot do. Instead, I will use a specific function to get the received items that haven't been invoiced yet. So here in the ribbon, I will click on Lines Functions, and there you will see now the function Get Receipt Lines. So this function now displays all the items that we have received, but for which we didn't get an invoice yet. You see, so these are the three items that I just showed you in my example. So now we can select more. So I will select here all the three items, because they all have been invoiced by the vendor. Next, I will click on OK. And there you will see now that the items are inserted in the purchase lines with their specific references, like the receipt number, for example. If necessary, you can still make changes to the quantities or the amounts. But in this case, suppose that everything is invoiced as we see it here. I can now post the invoice. So I can go to the Home tab in the ribbon. I can click on Post. And next, I will post the invoice. So everything is posted now. I will not go to the posted document because we already saw an example in the previous one. But let's go to the purchase orders. So I will now go to the purchase orders. And if I scroll down to the purchase orders we just looked at, 106, 26 and 27, you will see now that if we scroll to the right here on the purchase lines, that now the items are not only received but are also invoiced. You see, so posting the purchase invoice automatically updated the purchase order, and we can see now that everything has been received and invoiced. And so using the get receipt lines will allow us to post an invoice for multiple receipts at the same time, and the function will also update the underlying purchase orders. You can now go to the practice of this lesson, and in this practice you can create manually a purchase invoice to invoice expenses.